The Dr. Sneha Philip, who lived just blocks away from the World Trade Center, is last seen on September 10th. She's added to the list of 9/11 victims. That is until the NYPD starts investigating her personal history, and their investigation leads to her removal. Over the years, her family fights for her to be recognized as one of the victims, and in 2008, she finally is. But what one judge calls rank speculation about her continues. This is the second part of her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Sakina Jaffrey.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, last week we started to shine light on the story of Sneha Philip, a 31-year-old doctor who lived just a short distance from the World Trade Center and was last seen officially speaking on September 10th, 2001, the day prior to the terrorist attacks on the tower. Do you have any thoughts or questions before we get in, Vanessa?
Well, we didn't really talk much about Sneha last time. We talked mostly about the situation around her disappearance and a lot about 9/11. Are we going to be focusing more on Sneha's story today?
Yeah, so I hope to shine some light on maybe like what was going on or what was rumored to have been going on with her, because I think that has really shaped how her story is approached now. And I have a lot of feelings about it. So I might get up on my like virtual soapbox here for this episode. This episode, we are going to be talking about 9/11, obviously. Unlike last episode, this does include a little bit more of the outcomes of the attacks and the repercussions it had on recovery efforts of the individuals who died during the attacks. So we do talk a little bit more about bodies and what happened. So this might not be an episode for everyone.
Right. The last one was already kind of anxiety-inducing.
Yes.
This one's even more so.
I think
just
so.
As a warning to everybody. Okay.
Yeah. So when we last left off, the NYPD was just getting around to investigating her disappearance well after it happened. At this point, she's listed as a victim of 9/11. As part of this investigation, the NYPD starts digging into Sneha's life, and to understand why they did that, I suppose we're going to as well. And we're going to try to do this as sensitively as possible. We're going to backtrack a lot here. Sneha was born on October 7th, 1969 in Puttaparthi in India to Dr. Philip Philip and Ansu Philip. Sneha's father was a radiologist and his father was also a doctor. Her father graduated from medical school in India in 1965, but then did his medical residency and postgraduate work at Albany Medical College. He also served as associate professor at Albany Medical, so it's no wonder that the entire family, which included her older brother and her younger brother, settled in the Albany, New York region. In 1985, the family moved to Hopewell Junction in Dutchess County, New York, when Dr. Philip joined Radiology Associates at St. Francis Hospital as an interventional radiologist. Sneha, though, went to the Emma Willard School, which is a boarding and day school in Troy, New York, near Albany. I really always love looking at alumni lists for places like this, since it's like vastly different from my public school life. And the lists of alumni include people like suffrage leader Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the Jane Fonda, our U.S. State Senator from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, and that's really just to name a few.
Fancy then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not your American or my Canadian public school experience.
No. And so it's like probably not any wonder with this kind of background and what I've heard about her intelligence that after high school, she was accepted into Johns Hopkins University. And in 1991, she graduated with a degree in writing seminars and pre-medical studies. Now, Vanessa, I, of course, loved seeing writing on here, and I don't know exactly what their program was like in 1991, but today it means that students study prose and poetry writing. Not to be reductive, but basically it's a creative writing major. And I don't want to suppose anything about Sneha's deepest desires here, but I often encountered college students who would arrive in my writing classes because they wanted to take a fun class.
Mm-hmm.
And often those students were taking something either science heavy or business related because that's what they thought they needed to take to have a career, or that's what their parents wanted them to major in. I remember one student, she was a senior, having the realization in her last semester that she hated the lab and that she loved writing. It really wouldn't surprise me at all if one of Sneha's majors was a want and one was a have to kind of thing.
Right.
But again, I'm not her.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. But I always find it interesting when you see very dissimilar major types
Right.
for someone.
Right. Like I just saw someone recently who's got a major in business with a minor in dance. I'm like, you know that individual wants to be a dancer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, though, Sneha ends up in Chicago Medical School, and while there, she meets Ron. She was from an Indian family living on the East Coast. He was from a Jewish family living on the West Coast, so really vastly different backgrounds, but they actually had a lot in common. In addition to writing, she loved art. He played music in what sounds like kind of a jam session kind of way. So I get the sense that they were the artsy ones in med school, and that's helped them connect. But they also came from families of doctors. It's a family tradition to be a doctor. Now, Ron was set to graduate a year after Sneha, but the two wanted to graduate together. I'm assuming for placement reasons. So instead of graduating in 1998, Sneha went to Italy and traveled around on her own, which, honest, is my life dream. Just like drop me off in Italy, pick me up later.
If you ever run away, we know where you are.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, my Duolingo is set to Italian. I've got Italian life plans happening. The two of them end up graduating together in 1999. On May 13th, 2000, they marry at Troutbeck Inn in Amenia, New York. And since I looked it up, I've been getting nonstop Facebook suggestions for this place. It is quite beautiful, and I can see why they chose it. They married in a combination Jewish and Indian ceremony with 250 guests looking on. At the end, he gave her a necklace from her mother, which was a traditional Indian wedding pendant, and also he had the band play a jazz song that he composed himself titled Wow, She's So Great.
That's very sweet.
That is. I mean, I too have trouble with titles. So
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to say anything because it's sweet, but it's a fun title.
It is adorable, right? So, like, that's where they were, right?
Yeah.
They ended up getting a one-bedroom apartment in Battery Park, and Sneha was at Cabrini working on her residency, and Ron was at Jacobi. But things quickly got rocky. In May of 2001, Sneha received notice that Cabrini was not renewing her residency. Their rationale included that she had been asked to leave a few times because she was not prepared or focused, and because she'd been late as well. There's even an accusation that she came to work once while intoxicated. For a beginning physician in her residency, not renewing this contract would have been a major blow to her career. But it does get worse. In June of that year, she was at a bar with a group of her Cabrini co-workers. She alleged that one of those co-workers, a man, sexually assaulted her by groping her. She did report this to police the next day. The NYPD did an investigation, and during this, they basically said that she was lying and charged her with filing a false incident.
Does that actually happen often?
I don't know.
Before any of our listeners are afraid to file a complaint?
Yeah, I mean, I always say file away, but like...
Right. Definitely don't use this as a way to discourage yourself on filing if something happens.
Yeah, and so she was also charged with assault because she had hit the man, which she did fully admit to in her initial report, but she had alleged that she hit him after he groped her.
Which sounds like self-defense at that point.
Right, but she's charged with assault, and then she was also charged with harassment and trespassing because she went into the man's apartment after this happened and told his wife what he had allegedly done to her.
I can't really see that happening now. Like, this wasn't that long ago, but I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
Not the groping part. I know that happens, but the way the police handled it.
Right. I mean, I don't think allegations of assault are necessarily handled well now either.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
Now, again, this is all alleged because...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it got turned back. She ends up being the one charged. Now, I want to make clear, her family supports her claim. They say that, yes, this incident did happen, and that, yes, she had been having difficulty in her position at work and with her coworkers because of racism. Mm-hmm. Spokespersons for Cabrini say they have no record of sexual harassment allegations made by Sneha. It would be hard at this point to sort out how much of this is family wanting to preserve a certain memory of their loved one and what is factual, but if I ask myself whether or not I think someone could have had their claim of sexual assault thrown out, yes, I think that can happen. If I ask myself if a young Indian woman could experience racism and prejudice in the workplace, yes, I do think that happens. And if I ask myself if it's difficult for people to report harassment of any kind, yeah, I would say yes.
I can see, I guess I never thought of that charges could be put on the woman.
Yeah.
I always just thought, okay, they're either going to believe you or they're not. Not that you're going to get punished for it.
Well, and let's be honest, those are a lot of charges. That was...
Right.
Quite a big stack. Now, I also do think that people, their lives are complicated and sometimes their lives are messy, and things like medical residencies are notoriously hard and trying and not always safe spaces. So I can't say what happened. I just know that I'm not here to judge any of our missing women, and I care about sharing their stories even when they do get complicated. So whatever the case might have been, Sneha was arrested in June on those charges. They said that they would drop the charges if she recanted, but she refused and instead spent the night in jail, where apparently she passed the time meditating with her cellmate.
You have to wonder, though, if someone's willing to go to jail over it, it's probably true.
Yeah, she was not backing down.
Right. If she's not backing down, I feel I don't know. But like we said, we don't know. So
yeah.
Yeah.
We're 23 years out at this point, right?
Right.
She got a new position from there at St. Vincent's Hospital, which is now known as Richmond University Medical Center. Apparently, she actually was already in trouble there for failing to meet with a substance abuse counselor. According to some reports, Sneha had started to drink more after she was allegedly assaulted. So it sounds like things might not have been going smoothly there at her new position either.
Not defending her actions, but that also makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, Sneha had Monday, September 10th off through Wednesday, September 12th. And this is important because on that Monday, September 10th, she had a court date where she pleaded not guilty to the charges against her. The NYPD claims that after this, she and Ron got into an argument at the courthouse, during which Ron accuses her of abusing drugs and alcohol. And this is the wording that's used, and it's not mine, conducting bisexual acts. In this account of that day, Sneha storms away, leaving him behind. And this is because the other thing that NYPD uncovered, and I'm adding the biggest air quotes with that, is that when Sneha went out, she would go to lesbian bars in what looks like the Midtown to Lower Manhattan areas. I love how one author for the New York Magazine describes these bars. There was Julie's, which was described as a Midtown lesbian bar. I looked this one up, and it was described as being uptight and a place for power couples.
Okay.
There was Henrietta Hudson, which the New York Magazine author called a rocker dyke bar. Henrietta Hudson, by the way, still exists. It's actually one of the only remaining 3 lesbian bars in New York City, according to the New York City LGBT Historic Sites Project. And then there's what the author called a divey gay rock club, which is Meow Mix, which was a sex-positive lesbian bar. It was actually featured in the movie Chasing Amy. Unfortunately, Meow Mix is also now closed. And that's really depressingly sad, I think, for the LGBTQI plus communities that those spaces are lost.
But this also makes sense to me, because if she was assaulted at a bar and now when she goes out, she might want to be in a place where there are no or less men.
Yeah, I mean, her family says that she started going to these specific bars because she didn't want to experience harassment or assault from men again. And yeah, I say fair, because I also avoid areas in which I have to interact with a lot of men, right?
And to be clear, it doesn't mean Amy's a man hater.
No.
For any of our male listeners, don't go making up stories in your head about what that means. It just means that it's a safer place where you can relax. Because even as a man, you know that some men are not great. Not all men, but some.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, you know, my experience of going out to, like, I'm not, like, a heavy club person because I just like my quiet spaces in general. But, you know, like, my last, like, or one really, like, moment was, like, I went out to a club and came out, and there was, like, a man, like, pulls up in a car and starts to, like, unzip his pants and
see that not okay.
Yeah.
Like, light flirting that is, like, that they get the picture on when you're, like, not interested, fine, right? Like, that's some things have to start somewhere, like, when people are trying to have a relationship. Unzipping your pants, not cool ever.
No.
Not cool.
No, that was not.
And not understanding when a woman is not interested, not cool.
Like, I think I threw, like, napkins at him and ran away.
Did you?
Like, I ran.
The napkins were going to help you so much, Amy.
That's, like, all I had. Like, just, like, ran in my little, like, high heels. Like, oh, God. The 90s, 2000s were terrible. Anyway. Now, okay. Back to Sneha.
Okay.
Now, everyone agrees that Sneha would often go home with women that she met at these bars. And Ron agrees with that too. But he says that it's just so that she could have a space to connect with other women and talk about art or listen to music. For whatever reason she was there, though, the NYPD started to suggest that she was, at the very least, bisexual. Ron ends up saying, "These allegations of her being bisexual are ridiculous. Because we don't live a conservative lifestyle doesn't mean that anything abnormal is going on. I'm a musician, I've been going out to bars and clubs my whole life, and that doesn't mean these things are dangerous activities."
So why would her being bisexual have anything to do with her disappearance?
Oh, yeah, I'm getting there.
Are you getting there? Okay, because I'm, like, very confused right now.
Like, why
what does this have to do with anything else?
Yeah, why are we talking about her sexuality concerns?
Right.
So, yeah.
Like,
I have those same feelings, right?
Yeah, it's like if she, like, prefers coffee to tea. Like, how does that affect how she, how she disappears?
So, okay, but talking about Ron's statement, like, I'm going to be generous here with his language on this because it was, as we say, earlier times. But I really hate the use of the word allegations when it comes to someone's sexuality.
Right.
And the suggestion that being LGBTQIA+ is somehow abnormal. I get that he is trying to say is that just because someone went to a lesbian bar doesn't mean anything specific about their sexuality. And it certainly doesn't mean that they were doing anything risky by being at those spaces.
But again, how is that even risky? You know, like it's okay. I can agree with like drug and alcohol use being risky. I can't agree with this being risky.
Yeah, agreed. Right. So his language, even though I get the point he's trying to make, like it does not hit the right note here. But the NYPD puts forth more evidence to support their claims about Sneha's sexuality. And that's that they said that they interviewed her brother about her disappearance and that during the course of this interview, he mentioned that the two of them hadn't been speaking in the week before her disappearance. The NYPD says in the report that Sneha's brother told them that the argument stemmed from an incident where his sister was at his apartment with him and his girlfriend, and that he left to go to the store. Apparently, when he returned, the two were having sex in the living room, and they all got into a verbal argument and Sneha left. To be clear, this is something her brother denies saying. He's even at times said he never even spoke to the NYPD.
So she's in the apartment with her brother?
Yes.
Okay, and it's his girlfriend that she's supposedly...
Allegedly.
Yes, okay.
Hooking up with.
Okay.
Yeah. Now... Again, you might be wondering why I'm talking so much about her sexuality, because honestly, it does not and should not matter in the least. Except for the NYPD, it did.
Did this put her in like a really bad light?
They used it, along with the difficulties she was having at work, as part of their evidence to suggest that she did, in fact, disappear on September 10th.
Okay.
Yeah. The courts sided against the family and effectively removed her from the list of 9/11 victims.
Is this why you told us about the compensation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like finally putting together what you're trying to tell me, Amy.
All the pieces.
All the pieces finally go together.
Yeah, this is a complicated story.
Right.
And so the NYPD basically builds this entire case based on the fact that she went to some like lesbian bars.
And possibly cheated on her husband with her brother's girlfriend. And yeah.
Was having troubles at work. Like, what the heck? Okay.
Okay. Also, can we just say for a minute that even if somebody is doing things that other people don't agree with, we should still find them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So in January 2004, Ellen Borakov, who was the medical examiner's spokesperson, announced that Sneha was no longer on the list of 9/11 victims. She said, "This particular lady was known to be missing the day before. They had no evidence to show she was alive on 9/11. That day, they also removed Kapinga Nulula, 63, and Kasinga Kabeya, 58, who were a married couple from McKinney, Texas, who were in New York City for a sightseeing vacation. They were reported missing by their children, who hadn't heard from them after the attacks." With the removal of Kapinga and Kasinga and Sneha, Borakov said that for the first time, the number of people listed as having died in the attacks matched the number of death certificates. This brought the official total at the time to 2,749. It's hard not to feel like with these kinds of statements that it's not an indication that there was a huge push towards creating order out of something so chaotic and devastating as 9/11, but honestly, it does feel like there was some sort of satisfaction about having those two numbers balanced. Mm-hmm. Now, not everyone cared about the official total. A woman whose husband died in the attacks went on record to say, whether it was 3,000, 2,900, or 2,700, I don't believe it makes a difference to individual families that suffered a loss or to those who witnessed or who were touched by the event. And then she added, what matters is the magnitude of that loss and the way it affected us all. And on the one hand, I appreciate that sentiment, but that's someone talking about her loved one who was recognized as a victim and whose name is on the memorial. For a lot of families like Sneha's, their experience was vastly different. So you have instances like these three who were initially considered victims, who had their names removed, or you have people like Fernando Jimenez Molinar, who was an undocumented worker who was last heard from on September 8th. He had called his mother to tell her he was hired at a pizzeria. In March 2002, the request for his death certificate was denied. The judge says his whereabouts on September 11th could not be clearly fixed. Now, undocumented immigrants definitely faced major hurdles, probably more so than other victim groups. The Victims' Compensation Fund said that you could apply no matter the person's immigration status. But how can you prove someone was there when, for their own protection, they were trying to avoid being clocked? So they might have documents, but those could have been fake ones under names that weren't their own. For instance, we know that there were a lot of undocumented workers at Windows on the World, which, by the way, one of my favorite poems is Martin Espada's, which is called Alabanza, in praise of Local 100, about the workers in that restaurant. We also know that there were service staff. It's really hard to say how many there were, but the estimated number is 67 undocumented workers died that day, of which only 12 of their families were able to come forward and prove their existence to get aid. There's a stunning quote by Renee Alegria in Invisible Victims, Undocumented Migrants, and the Aftermath of September 11th by Dr. Alexandra Delano and Dr. Benjamin Nianas that reads, during the yearly televised ceremony when it comes to the time of reading of the names of those lost that day, I can't help but think of the kitchen staff, my friends, and how their names are not read out loud or publicly honored, but they are far from forgotten. Each year I honor their lives in my own small way. Every 9/11, I say a quiet prayer and repeat, I remember you, over and over again. So that's part of it, because they aren't on the memorial, and also to get support, you had to prove that someone was there and get an official death certificate that showed the person died on September 11th. And I promise this is all going to connect.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the very thing that was designed to help family, these compensation packages, these were also the reason that there were so many people wary of 9/11 claims. Going hard on this was seen as a necessity to root out fraud. And really, the grim reality is that there was fraud. A woman made up a spouse who sold stocks and worked on the World Trade Center so that she could collect more than $53,000 from various agencies. Another woman made up a younger brother and collected $63,000 before she was caught. And for some, this fraud wasn't financially motivated, but socially, like a woman named Tanya Head, who claimed to have worked at Merrill Lynch and was on the 78th floor when the South Tower was hit. She actually became president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network Support Group and was invited to University universities to talk about her experience of survival and until she was uncovered as a...
So she wasn't even there?
No.
Okay.
No. We'll be back in a moment. I guess I was in my own bubble at the time because I didn't know that all of this was happening, like the aftermath of 9/11 in this way, right? For Sneha's family, her removal from the list also meant that, like those undocumented workers and others, they would not be financially compensated by the fund. In 2005, Judge Renee Roth ruled that Sneha died on September 10th, and this was set forth by state law 3 years to the day after her unexplained disappearance commenced. And in June 2006, a surrogate court ruled against Ron's request that she be added back on the list. Now, at this point, the fund was closed. It actually ran out of money. So to be clear, at this point, it's not financially motivated, but it was about how Sneha was remembered. Later, Ron received a death certificate listing her date of death as September 10th, but her family wasn't about to let this rest. It was again about the recognition about what happened to her and how they believed at her core, like who their daughter was, who their wife was, who their sister was. She was the kind of person they thought who would have gone in to help people. This ends up at a higher court. In the spring of 2008, a ruling came in from the Appellate Division First Department on this case. It was a 4-1 ruling in favor of Ron. And Justice Sachs wrote an opinion on this case. And I really think it's important to include some of these quotes here because it really frames out kind of a bigger picture of what I want to say about how her case is handled. Justice Sachs wrote about the previous decision to remove her. The evidence he submitted, meaning Ron, was based upon circumstantial evidence, habit, and his wife's predisposition to help others according to the highest calling of her medical profession. The surrogate declined to issue the requested decree assessing the evidence to be insufficient to establish her presence at the time and place. We believe that the record properly supports the position advanced by the petitioner, and we therefore reverse. So they're saying that even though effectively a lower court had said there wasn't enough evidence, this court is saying, like, we respectfully disagree on that.
So they think she might have been there.
They think that there's, like, enough evidence.
A very good chance that she was in that building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in this opinion, Justice Sachs also points out that in their investigation, the NYPD did not actually find evidence that something did happen to Sneha before 9/11. And that while there was plenty to suggest that she did die on 9/11, there was not similarly evidence to suggest that something happened to her before. And that her ventures outside the home were not, in the justice's words, showing that she took risks in doing so, right? So they're essentially saying, like, hey, NYPD, you have not proven anything about what happened to her. Like, you just talked about what was going on in her life, and that proves nothing.
Right.
That is not evidence that something happened to her. He also said, and I think that this is important for us all to hear, even without direct proof, irrefutably established that her route that morning took her past the World Trade Center at the time of the attack, the evidence shows it to be highly probable that she died that morning and at that site, whereas only the rankest speculation leads to any other conclusion. Now, so Vanessa, you are not aware of this story.
Mm-mm.
So you are not aware of the rankest speculation that happens about her disappearance, but that speculation continues today despite this ruling in 2008. There are actual polls online about what people think happened to her, and the overwhelming majority believe that she died before September 11th, or that she even faked her own death and is living elsewhere.
So that's what just regular people think?
Yes.
Like, not investigators.
Right. So, you know, in making this podcast where I'm like, about it, like we are actually going somewhat against the grain here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So one of the pieces of proof that's often used that she had decided on September 11th should just go live a different life is that there was a secret sent to Post Secret. Do you remember Post Secret?
No, I do not know what this is.
I was like this project where people would like make up postcards and write their secrets on it and mail it to this guy, and he would anonymously post them online.
Okay.
So there's like now books and all that kind of stuff about like people's secrets that they're sharing.
Okay.
Now, one of these shows a rendering of the towers on fire and then the words, "Everyone who knew me before 9/11 believes I'm dead."
So they think it's definitely her.
Right.
It can't be someone else. It can't be somebody just making this up.
Yeah.
So it's definitely from Sneha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But I'd like to say that at this point, the burden of proof for Sneha's death on 9/11 is far greater than most. And that's in part because her story was sensationalized in this way, right? I mean, if we start to believe that, then are you saying that because she went to lesbian bars that something happened?
Well, I think what they're saying is if you're bisexual or you go to a lesbian bar,
you're at risk?
You're way at risk for anything to happen to you. And then it's going to be your fault.
Yeah, I was actually talking to my husband about this, and he was like, wouldn't you be safer at the lesbian bar? And I was like, yes, that's why straight women go to the... Anyway, so there are people who say that they will not believe that she died there until it has been definitively proven by DNA. To that, I say it's important to note that the identification of remains is still ongoing. In September of 2023, victims 1,648 and 1,649 were identified. Those were the first in 2 years. This January, John Valentine Niven, who was 44 when he died, was identified as victim 1,650. The work in identifying the dead has not stopped. Over 20,000 remains were brought in for identification. Some of those included complete bodies, but most were tiny fragments of bone that were hard to distinguish from the inorganic material. The debris field from the towers collapsing spanned more than 16 acres and also spanned 70 feet above ground and 70 feet below the surface. There were subterranean fires for months, and because there was jet fuel mixed in, some of these fires exceeded 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a heartbreaking but important research article about the identification of individuals titled "Victim Identification and Body Completeness Based on Last Known Location at the World Trade Center," where the authors break down the process of identification. They call this one of the largest crime scenes and most complex mass disaster recovery operations in United States history. Now, this article was published in 2022, and at that point, there were 2,753 known victims, and identification had been made for just 1,647 of those, leaving 1,106, or roughly 40%, unidentified. We also know that there is, based on the last reports I read, 27 individuals whose DNA does not match up to known victims. None of these numbers include the terrorists, who I know some people have this question. Yes, some of their remains have been identified. Also, I know there has been speculation that there's no way that authorities could have allowed Sneha to enter the building that morning after the attack and then make her way up the floors to render aid. First, if it was her at the apartment, she could have easily have gotten there before emergency personnel arrived. Second, there's also a question if she was in the building already. But in case anyone was wondering, because I was, this report shows that yes, a large number of victims had last known locations at or above the impact zones. But unidentified individuals are represented in lesser degrees throughout both buildings, including all the way down to the lobby. So people who were killed that day were not only in those higher floors. In 2005, Dr. Robert Shaler, the chief medical examiner I mentioned at the start of the episode, said that there were 1,000 samples or so that were not identified. For some, the team actually had to pause the process of identifying remains and wait for science to catch up. That basically, with new technology, they could try new techniques or processes to identify victims. Some of those would have initially been cited as ones with poor or low quality DNA readings. He added, though, that there were remains that would never be identified because there was no biological material left in them due to the heat of the fires.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So
we've talked about that in other episodes where sometimes even if you have some remains, it doesn't mean you can get the DNA.
Exactly. And so there are definitely some, there's just not anything to draw DNA from. There's no DNA there. It's also possible that her remains might never be found. We know that many family members who lost someone believed that their loved one's remains were at the Fresh Kills landfill, which was used to dispose of the remnants of the towers. Fresh Kills received its last barge of 9/11 materials on March 22nd of the following year, and we also know that investigators were there for over a year searching through the debris looking for remains that might have been missed. And some family members actually have asked that there be some way to bury these sections of the building in recognition that human remains are among these building debris. They were denied that. And so we already have people whose loved ones are considered to have died on 9/11, but whose remains have not been identified and may never be identified. They are included and recognized as victims because they had some sort of other evidence that their loved one was there. The planes themselves, those are considered closed scenes. So with a flight manifest, investigators knew which crew and passengers were on those planes. And if you add in
right.
Yeah. So if you add in the terrorists, like everyone's accounted for, right? The towers, though, that's actually a different story because that's considered an open scene.
Right. Anybody could be in there.
Any country. So you knew, like, some people were supposed to be at work that day. Right.
But it's not only people working, right? Weren't there like a lot of visitors and like other people too?
Exactly. So you have tourists, you have people who are just going into the building, you have people who were wanting to go to the restaurant, or I think there's a coffee shop on the first floor, right? Like you had people in and out. And so this like notion of just like solidify.
Right. And emergency personnel were dying that day in there as well, right?
Yeah. So you have those people who are in and out.
Okay.
Right?
So you know what? I'm realizing while we're talking about these episodes, I never really like looked into or researched, or I'm not going to say I don't care about 9/11, but I never paid attention to it. And now through talking to you about this, so I'm going to admit, so I have anxiety disorder, and this is sparking panic attacks in me. And they did last episode when we were talking about the first part of this. And now I'm thinking I've just been actually avoiding this material for basically since it happened. So while I thought I was just like disinterested, I think I've been actually like actively avoiding it because this is a lot.
Well, like to wrap your head around what happened or the possibility.
Right, because I've never gone to, like, they made movies about it and stuff like that, and I was always like, no, not going to do that. Yeah. I'm feeling right now
like that
in my chest why I avoided these things for so long.
Well, and I think as well, like, there's the initial thing that happened, the initial attacks, right? And then there's also like trying to think about like the 23 years since.
Right. When you get into the numbers and that they're still identifying them now, and like we know all these things, but it's like like I know what's there. I know everything you're saying, but I think I it's one of those things you know without really like
without knowing,
without paying attention, without like absorbing that knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, like in our first episode, like part of this story is like the knowing what happened, and then there's like the deeper understanding.
Right. Like the lack of closure these people are dealing with, and like that's just still a spot that people are still going like,
yeah,
you know, like there's no way to avoid this.
Right. So it's like the enormity of it. And so if you consider like, if you have to wrap your head around closed scene, open scene, right? Like people just going into a building and not coming out, like.
Yeah. So when you get to the part with the airplane, like the airlines knowing exactly who's on it, and I'm like, so like, it doesn't matter if they don't find them or not. If they find them or not, they know that they were there. So it's just.
Yeah. And so, you know, like you have these situations in which like, if you're taking like as a whole, there are stories of people who went to work that day who were not supposed to go to work that day.
Right.
Or people who took the day off when they were supposed to be there. And so there's like always been this question of like, how do you actually decide who was there and who wasn't?
Right. I think it's really unfair. And I don't know. I don't know, like you said, that the general idea is that she faked this. And I mean, maybe that happened, but I think it's really unfair to say that.
Well, yeah. So that's why I said, like, the burden of proof for her has always been so much higher, right? So you have all these people who basically, you know, without much, like, could get their relative, like, counted, right? There's one man who's included on the September 11th list because he had been at a local deli he frequented, and another regular overheard him telling a man with brown hair that he had a meeting at the World Trade Center, and he hasn't been seen since. And he's included on the list of 9/11 victims, but there aren't forums dedicated to hashing over what happened to him. And it's actually interesting because he had some similarities with her. Like, he was also having trouble at work. He also was dealing with depression.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask, though. Is he white?
No.
Okay.
I don't get that sense. I didn't look him up.
Okay, so it's not like a
not like a
racism, sexism, like
well,
the whole package
His wife was the mayor of Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
So I think that
class-wise,
that might have helped there, right?
Right, because I'm just thinking, okay, so, you know, like there's this girl and I think she has substance abuse issues and she's Indian and she might not be completely straight, you know, like,
Right.
and she might go out once in a while and she might do all these things. So, of course, she's like,
Yeah.
she's somewhere living her life and lying to the
or
whole
something
entire
else
world.
happened to her.
Right, or something else. But, like, it's just,
Yeah. And
I just don't know why. It's almost like she's becoming like a fable, like the sensationalized fable of what people want to think happened to her instead of...
Yeah. So I guess, like, you know, for anyone who's actually listening to this and who comes down on the side of, well, like, I just want to know what happened to her and that it's better to think that she didn't die then because, like, we could actually investigate her case. Like, I just, like, want you to examine, like, why you think that for her and not for other people. And are you leaning into, like, a false idea of what justice might be for her?
Right.
So, like, this other guy, you know, like, he was a volunteer firefighter. She was a medical professional. He gets to have this whole, like, you know, his own mythology where people believe that he went towards the building to help. But, like...
So he's the hero.
Right, but her story gets...
She's like this villain. The villain and the hero.
Yeah,
and
well,
they're almost the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe not even villain, but, like, seeing her as, like, this flawed human who, you know...
I feel like almost she became the villain in her own story with just the way they treated her when she said that the guy sexually assaulted her. And then with some of these other things, too. So maybe not full-out villain, but people are definitely not being kind.
Right. And, like, I do admit, like, she did have a lot going on in her life before 9/11 happened. You know...
So do a lot of people.
Exactly. I don't want to speculate about her sexuality or what was happening in her marriage, but like I do think it's clear that 2001 was a difficult year for her. In fact, September 10th, the fact that she had to go to court that morning, that itself had to be emotionally draining and potentially traumatizing for her. Now, this is going to seem like an aside for a second, so I just need you to go.
Me?
Well, and
all
our
of
listeners, all of us. You just have to go with me on this.
Let's trust you.
Okay, so one of my favorite essays to teach, and I think one of the best essays I've ever read, is by Joanne Beard called The Fourth State of Matter. In fact, in it, she writes about her aging collie going through like the long goodbye and caring for her through her death, which my students are always like, don't make me read about a dog.
So the dog is dying?
The dog is dying.
Yeah, so your students won't want to read that.
Like slowly too.
No, yeah, let's not do slow doggy deaths.
Right. And it opens with that, and it's also about her divorce from her husband, and it's about a group of squirrels that have invaded one of the rooms of her home, and she's like trying to like deal with that. She also writes about her like malaise at work. She's like unhappy there. She's serving as a managing editor of a physics journal at the University of Iowa. And it's not until most of the way through the essay that she gets to the part of her essay where she reveals that one day she goes home from work and she's not there when her colleagues were shot and killed by a former graduate student who worked in the department. It's what we would consider actually one of the first mass shootings at a university, and 6 people died that day. And my students, they would say, like, why didn't she just start her essay there with the shooting? Like, why don't we begin there? Why did they have to go through pages of, like, her life basically falling apart? And I would say, like, it's precisely for that reason. Like, the shooting didn't happen in isolation. Life was already being lived, tragedies were already happening and experienced when that shooting happened, right?
Right.
And so when I think of Sneha, I think of the same thing. It's possible that, yes, she was experiencing these hardships and could have died on 9/11. Like, countless of other people who died that day were having trouble at work, or were going out to bars, or were having arguments with their relatives, or were, yes, even exploring their sexuality. The thing is, we didn't put them under the same microscope the way that we did for her. I will say I do agree there is an ongoing question that I know someone out there can answer. Why they're keeping quiet might be only known to them, but it would help lay to rest some of the rumors about Sneha. On September 10th, Sneha didn't come home. Like, we know that. And that night, there was a strong thunderstorm throughout New York City. It's unlikely that she was just wandering the streets by herself, like packages in hand all night. She must have been somewhere, and someone knows where that was. And finally, sharing that information could finally close the door to what happened to her between September 10th and September 11th.
Yes, because she was clearly not sleeping at her brother's. She was not at her cousin's.
Yes.
So if she went home with somebody else or did something...
Yeah, like the Amex was
somebody
not
needs
used
to
at like a
speak-
hotel or... Yeah.
Yeah.
So where was she? And like, there's a lot of reasons I think someone would want to keep that information quiet. But
Right.
also keeping it quiet has meant this like continued rankest speculation, as the judge said, right?
Right.
But I want to really end up back at Sneha. Of Sneha, her mother said, she was really intelligent, really compassionate. She was my best friend. We talked almost every day. For the longest time, I waited for the phone to ring. Sneha, though still missing, is listed as victim 2,751 of the World Trade Center attacks. In 2008, her family received word that when the 9/11 memorial was built, her name would be listed. And it is. You can find her name at the South Pool on panel S66. And when I'm in New York City next time, I plan on visiting her name. But if any of you are there before me, please do the same for her.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, South Pool, read by Sakina Jaffrey. Sakina can currently be seen on the Showtime series Billions and the TNT drama Snowpiercer, where she plays scientist Mrs. Hedwood. She can also be seen on Apple's limited series Defending Jacob, where she plays District Attorney Lynn Canavan. She was a series regular on the NBC series Timeless, playing the role of Agent Denise Christopher. Sakina starred as White House Chief of Staff Linda Vasquez in the Netflix series House of Cards. She has recurred on Little Voice and can also be seen as Captain Willa Kamal on Lost in Space for Netflix, as Mama G in Neil Gaiman's American Gods for Starz, and as Dr. Meyer on Homeland for Showtime. Recent films include Red Sparrow, The Meyerowitz Stories, and Equalizer 2. One of her greatest hits includes her role as Nilma, Kate Hudson's bat-wielding neighbor in Garry Marshall's Raising Helen.
South Pool, panel S66. Sneha Philip, 31, missing since September 10, 2001, from Manhattan, New York. My professor asks, how do you write a 9/11 story? And the room fills with our anxious shifting. It's impossible, someone finally says, while we all think of the bodies, the way we didn't expect to see them fall from the sky, the way we heard plane and thought propeller, a light-bodied aircraft surely, until the screens of our televisions showed us differently. My professor asked, how do you write a 9/11 story? And now, I know he wanted us to think of the impossibility of it, but I think he never considered how it isn't in the enormous weight of each plane, but in the bluebird sky morning before white sheets of paper spiraled through the sky. The way the streets filled with chirping, not of birds, but of pass devices, each alert designed to warn of a firefighter down, so they could be rescued by their brothers and sisters. But Sneha, there were too many that day to save them all, and there were no mechanisms to mark your path, no resounding chirp to indicate you'd stop moving in that silty dark. And now, I think I don't know, once again, how to tell a 9/11 story without you in it. Even though I can't place you on the street, detect from what angle you saw fire billow through the skies, or measure how many milliseconds it took for the sound of the towers starting to fall to reach the curve of your ear. I will never know if you held another hand in yours or whispered to a stranger that they would be okay. But I can still see you there, moving forward. Moving forward.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcasts.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.